Hello there. This is part 3 in the series Morality and Faith. Today we're going to be discussing moral relativity. And just to give a quick introduction in what we're going to be examining today is the idea that if you have relative morals, the question is, are they actually connected to the primary expression of morality? Are they connected to the actual pragmatic truth? And as we've discussed before, morals exist not as concrete or material truths, but they exist as pragmatic or functional truths. They exist on a little bit different plane. They're sort of like Platonic or abstract forms. And just to give a quick overview of what we've gone over in part 1 and part 2, is that morals exist as pragmatic truths. And morals must be primary expressions if they are to actually be legitimate and sincere in the course of morality. If people are only behaving ethically or morally for utilitarian purposes, then the primary expression of their behavior is something other than the morals itself. And therefore we have a huge fracture in the logic of morality because what is going on is not actual morality, but something else. So morals have to be pragmatic truths if they're going to be real, and if the actual behavior somebody is behaving is to be truly considered as moral, then the primary expression of their behavior must be the morality itself. So that's just sort of the starting point we have today. So the first thing I'd like to talk about today is the idea that people are relative. This is something which is absolute. If you go and you look at different people, people are going to have different taste, different dispositions, they have different characteristics, they've had different life experiences. People are without a doubt relative. However, abstract forms are not. Primary expressions that people have may be different from person to person, but pragmatic truths themselves are not relative. They are constants. The abstract form of something is constant. If we go back in time to the ancient philosophers, and we look at even Aristotle and the idea of virtue ethics, or even look at Plato and the idea of Platonic forms, they understood that there was something constant and absolute about these things which existed beyond our tangible world. They were consistent throughout time because they existed in a little bit different plane. Well, the thing is with morality, people are going to have primary expressions in their behavior, but the question is that primary expression originating from that abstract form, from that pragmatic truth of virtue itself? So let's talk about a little bit different things. People are, without a doubt, relative. And it's because the fact that people are relative that morality cannot be. If morality is going to be real as a pragmatic truth, and it is going to be the primary expression of one's behavior, then morality cannot be relative. And the reason why is because people are relative. And you have a logical inconsistency if you're trying to say something which is not relative is founded on something which is relative. So let me get into this a little bit. Let me actually change gears just a little bit. I want to talk about a practical issue that happens when we validate the notion of moral relativity. And I don't mean that we are to go out and say that people can't have differences in their personal lives. People are going to have differences. They're going to be relative. And you know what? That's fine. But the idea about morality, saying that all morals are equal, which the logical conclusion of that, or using some of the language from our other things, the pathological conclusion is that nothing is real. If all morals are valid, then no morals are valid. And there's really a disaster that comes with this, and it's because it creates a ring of power. And while a ring of power may be created with good intentions, and even good people may wield it for a while, the thing is that at the end of the day, there's an opportunity for someone corrupt to get that. And this idea of moral relativity is sort of this, it's sold under this sort of, I would say, a lazy thinking of tolerance, and that we're going to be peaceful with one another. But the problem is you can't unilaterally create peace. You cannot unilaterally administer tolerances between multiple people. The reality is somebody else is going to have their own disposition, and someone else's relative values may be more dominant than the ones that are being presented to them. And when this happens, the one with the more dominant system will destroy the others. And so the thing is that whenever you create moral relativity, you are creating a ring of power for someone to seize and to bring a lot of tyranny and corruption, and really just death and violence in general is often what comes out of this in history. So back to the idea of that if morals are going to be sincere, they have to be connected to the pragmatic truth of morality, and they have to be our primary expression when they come in our behavior. So really with the question of moral relativity, if we get and boil down to really the heart of this question is, do we create morals ourselves, or do we discover them in the world around us? And now, going strictly from the logical notion of this, and going from the idea of morals existing in the realm of abstract forms, we realize that we do not actually create abstract forms, we discover them. Things like gravity. things like advanced mathematics. If you get into something like calculus, we do not create these. We may develop the formulas and ways of looking at them, but these are things which are constants. We discover them and we discover new understandings of them. We can never really get to the point where we touch the abstract form or the pragmatic truth itself, although it can manifest in our lives in very meaningful ways. So when it comes to the terms of morality, if we realize that morals, similar to things like gravity, similar to things like calculus, they are sort of abstract constants which exist throughout time, which we can discover and then interact with. If we understand that they exist on that plane, then we must discover them and not just pull them out of ourselves. Because whenever we say we're going to pull them out of ourselves, we're creating a ring of power and we're opening up the door for a lot of destruction. And even when people may say, we're going to do this, and they may even pull some anecdotal evidence, people can live for a while. It may take a while before someone corrupt gets that ring of power, but whenever you validate the claim that morals can come from inside the self, the problem is that you're creating an opportunity for the logical movement away from the pragmatic truth itself. Whenever you're drawing out of the self instead of the pragmatic truth in its natural form, you are moving away from the original point of this. And people may not even realize by their own moral code. They may think they're getting it from internal, when it may be something passed down culturally. It may be something that's passed down from their family design at home. There's a lot of ways that people get this. Again, if I've said this once, I've said it many times. We do not have to confess, acknowledge, or even give any credence to our value system for it to be functioning in our lives. A lot of times people have no idea where their moral code was developed from. And yet pragmatic truths function without our knowledge or consent perfectly fine. So the thing is if morals are going to be constant, if morality is going to be real and significant in the world around us, it must come from an external source, or else it's going to be inconsistent. Over time, it's going to become increasingly inconsistent. And if we want morality to be something which really shapes humanity for the better cause, if it's going to be sincere to the pragmatic truth of morality, and it's going to be our actual primary expressions in our behavior, then it cannot come from inside ourselves. It must come from somewhere outside of ourselves. So sort of the last thing I'd like to say is, whenever you say there's an internal origin for morality, you are creating a ring of power. And this happens. It's simply because people are relative. And not all values that people have are on an equal playing field. Sometimes people are more dominant, sometimes people are more violent, and it only takes a small amount of life-ending actions to result in life-ending actions. But the reality of it is there's a ring of power with the internal validation of morality, and by definition it is no longer connected to that pragmatic truth, the abstract form of morality. It is then connected to something which is relative. And again, there's a fracture in the logic when we don't acknowledge that morality must come from some external source. It must come from the sort of abstract plane. So if we are going to have true morality that is sincere and it is originating out of the pragmatic truth of morals, and we're going to have consistency between different people who have primary expressions in their behavior, we must find this source for morality outside of ourselves. And that's sort of the last thought I have for this. If you enjoyed this video, I ask that you subscribe to our channel, like our Facebook page, and just follow us in general. And please feel free to post your questions and comments, and I'd love to hear those and get back with you. And thank you for watching.